Good morning, everybody. Hello, everyone. I'm Barbara, and as Damien said, I'm in charge of corporate social responsibility and people at Asendia, and I'm absolutely delighted to be here at Deliver 2022. In case you haven't heard of Asendia, we are a joint venture funded by La Poste in France and Swiss Post, and we specialize in cross-border road and air freight shipping, primarily for retailers and brands selling online. And we are 10 years old this year. We are operational on 4 continents: Europe, Asia, Oceania, and North America. And we partner with hundreds of airlines, local postal networks, and last-mile delivery specialists. We say the world is your address, which means we're passionate about empowering international growth with the right e-commerce and mail solutions. We also want to help retailers to be greener in the services they offer, and that's what I'm going to talk about today. The climate catastrophe requires collective efforts, of course. I'm very proud to say that since January this year, all our transportation around the world has been verified 100% carbon neutral, thanks to our extensive program of offsetting. And it's important to note we are offsetting Scope 3 emissions because Asendia doesn't own its own fleet, its own vehicles. So, in this session, first, I'll be exploring why sustainability matters, even if I believe this insight has become common sense in the meantime. Secondly, I look at the challenges our industry faces at a time when consumers love buying online, but also care about the planet. And finally, but most importantly, I reveal how Asendia has achieved carbon neutrality and what we plan to do next on our environmental and social governance journey. But first, here's a short video about Asendia. Yes, together we can make a difference. I don't need to remind anyone here of the impact the global COVID lockdowns had on e-commerce. Consumers swarmed online for their essentials and their treats. According to Partlycart, some of the more unusual items purchased online by British consumers during the 2020 lockdown included an inflatable pup, a penny farthing, and a piece of the moon. Well, I'm sure there were eccentricities all over the world. But essentially, retailers and their delivery partners pulled out all the stops to meet unprecedented levels of demand during the pandemic. And many haven't looked back since. The e-commerce industry has enjoyed 2 years of rapid growth. While demand may drop back a little as the pandemic recedes and new challenges are faced, the overall projection is that global e-commerce will expand by $1 trillion before 2025. And now, why sustainability matters and why we need a balancing act. Alongside the boom in online shopping, we've seen more and more shoppers demanding greener e-commerce. And I guess these shoppers are also your clients if I look at the audience. This is putting pressure on retailers to find more sustainable delivery and return solutions. I wonder whether you would confirm this trend, but this is what we observe when talking to our customers, so the retailers. The biggest challenge seems to be to find a balancing act regarding consumer expectations of rapid delivery times to international destinations, with the need to lower the carbon footprint of every parcel. There are legal pressures looming too, which means carbon reporting, offsetting and reduction is going to be a big topic in the next few years. There's still much to be decided about carbon reduction in aviation, shipping and trucking. But let's get real, this is not a question of if, but when. Carbon reporting simply must be mastered by our industry, and the sooner accredited carbon calculation and labeling can be integrated into delivery services, the better. This is certainly something we're working on at Asendia, in the absence of agreed common industry standards for carbon calculation. Against this backdrop, how green have retailers themselves become so far? From our daily conversations with brands around the world, it's clear they are at widely varying stages of maturity when it comes to their ESG journeys. Some brands have succeeded in presenting themselves as passionate about proactive regarding sustainability. They are transforming operations and publishing carbon data. Others are yet to fully map out their priorities and targets. As you can see on the slide, big, well-known global brands are really starting to report and reduce carbon. Certainly, everyone understands that being accused of greenwashing is bad for brand reputation. This is another good reason to be transparent and clear about carbon emissions and related calculation methodology. Most of the retailers are using multiple carrier partners, of course, and in the absence of agreed global industry standards, different carrier partners might use slightly different methodology, which doesn't mean, of course, that the calculations they do are not correct. It's just that there is no global agreed industry standard in place about how to calculate carbon. Let's get back to the challenges our industry faces when consumers, on one hand, love buying online, but on the other hand, they are asking for greener delivery and sustainable delivery options. We should really consider their mindset and ask, how green are they? Surveys repeatedly suggest they want more sustainable delivery when they order online. For instance, the International Post Corporation found 44% of online shoppers have changed their purchasing behavior to be more sustainable. But, and maybe you would confirm or not, but many retailers we speak to don't yet see evidence in the real world. They say their customers still largely focus on convenience and speed rather than environmental impact. Cost is a big issue, with a question hanging over whether or not shoppers would be willing to pay a premium for carbon neutral or low emission delivery, or whether retailers are willing to take a hit to profits. Zalando has tested the water on charging shoppers a token amount, 25 cents only, to compensate for the emissions caused by their parcel delivery. And no doubt others will follow suit. It's also worth considering that sustainability is not a corporate priority everywhere in the world, and maybe not even an individual priority everywhere in the world. Green issues are not important to all consumers, to all shoppers yet. But attitudes are changing fast. Western consumers now understand that reuse, recycling and slower delivery of their online orders could all play a part in carbon reduction. We've seen the rise of second-hand fashion and apparel rental sites such as Vinted, Kutoni, Depop and Vester Collectif. It's all evidence of the circular economy and greener lifestyles becoming a reality. So, to answer my question of the beginning, should we care? Well, yes, of course. The climate emergency cannot be ignored. Here are a few statistics, just to remind us all of the challenge we face to meet the Paris Agreement. As you all know for sure, the goal is to limit global warming to well below 2 degrees, preferably to 1.5 degrees Celsius compared to the pre-industrial levels. So, how to face this collective challenge and how Asendia is playing its part to meet, let's say, the expectations that are placed vis-à-vis us in this collective challenge. At Asendia, we believe it is possible for brands to expand into new markets around the world while keeping the carbon impact of their delivery minimal. Like many players in the e-commerce shipping industry, we set an ambitious target to neutralize our environmental impacts and pass that benefit on to our retail clients and their shoppers around the world. One big challenge, and this is important, we face is that Asendia does not own transport assets and infrastructure like trucks and airplanes. Instead, we buy services from the transport providers for our shipping routes, and 95% of our emissions come from these vehicles. This makes it hard for us to manage carbon reduction ourselves beyond partnering with carbon-conscious suppliers and carrier partners. So we have focused on offsetting to achieve carbon neutrality. And to be precise, we are actually offsetting Scope 3 emissions of our logistics suppliers, and this is quite extraordinary. It's not what is normally being done by other competitors. Asendia was funded in 2012. This is why we will celebrate our 10th anniversary this year. And we have started to offset carbon since the very beginning of our joint venture. And we have progressed our sustainability journey rapidly in the last few years. As of January 2022, Asendia offsets 100% of its international transport emissions. This includes those by our delivery partners, Scope 3, parcel returns, building and machinery emissions, but also emissions related to corporate administration, such as business trips and energy. carbon neutrality has been achieved by our investment in EcoAct verified wind farm projects, mostly in China. These projects are certified with the United Nations CDM label. CDM stands for Clean Development Mechanism and was established by the United Nations to fulfill the climate targets set by the Kyoto Protocol. So this is a very independent standard controlled by the United Nations. EcoAct, on their side, this is our partner for carbon offsetting project, is a long-established international climate consultancy and project developer. This organization, EcoAct, was selected by our parent company La Poste already because it holds environmental accreditations and provides ongoing support, advice and accountability. These wind farm projects have many positive impacts, from promoting renewable energy, to creating jobs and economic stability in local communities. So it's the renewable energy on one hand, but there are also positive side effects for the local communities where the wind farms are operated on the other hand. For example, the Gaolin Wind Project in China involves the construction and maintenance of 88 wind turbines with the goal of injecting more clean, renewable energy into the electricity mix. We are also able to report the amount of carbon we are offsetting in our regular corporate updates, and this is powerful information to share both internally and with external customers and stakeholders. Yes, please. Yes, so I will try to hear you. Yes?
So my question is, like, when you say that you are putting a lot of money in that in creating the good power from the windmills and all. So you, as Asendia, you also have your own warehouses as well?
We do have.
And then when you use the energy, will you prefer to get it from some sustainable sources? Are you working on that as well? Because we are doing it in our company, so I just wanted to understand, like, how you are doing it.
Okay. Thank you for the question. A very good one. So, first of all, 95% of the Asendia Group carbon footprint comes from international transport, and to be precise, mostly from air transport. This is why so far we have been focusing on this big piece, so these 95%. I will talk about that a bit later. Now, since 2022, we are of course also offsetting scope 1 and 2 emissions. So this is, for instance, energy used in warehouses, but we have not yet worked to, for instance, use renewable energy in our own warehouses, simply because this is a very minor piece of our Asendia Group carbon footprint. But this will come, because we believe even if it's small steps, it's worth investigating. So that's a very interesting approach you are taking here. Okay. And yes, you are of course right. Offsetting may not be the perfect solution, but in the world we are awaiting innovations. Maybe you've heard about sustainable aviation fuel and other carbon-cutting developments. And so we believe it's a worthwhile way to progress towards our ESG goals. It's an intermediate step before we will globally really be able to substantially reduce carbon emissions, for instance, in aviation. We are also looking to reduce our carbon footprint, working with partners and finding new initiatives to operate in ways that are more carbon efficient. This is exactly the point you raised before. We also offer free advice and waste-saving services, such as data cleaning and digitized returns to the retailers we work with, in the knowledge that the more collaborative support we give, the sooner benefits to the environment will filter through. And now I will talk a little bit about methodology. I hope you will not be bored. It's a bit of maths, but it's really not complicated. So in terms of the way we calculate our emissions, the first calculation methodology measures carbon emissions caused by our international transports. A parcel's weight is multiplied by the distance traveled with a different mode of transport, with a different mode, so means of transport factored in. So we can calculate our delivery partners' emissions per shipment and offset that amount. This methodology is not an invention of Asendia. This is a very common methodology in the logistics industry, and most of logistics carbon calculators you'll find online are based on this methodology. The only thing that can vary are the emission factors that are linked to the means of transport. Emission factors for air transport will be higher than emission factors for road, and emission factors for national short flights will be higher than emission factors for intercontinental long flights with only few landings and starts. That's quite common sense. Hoppala. Then we have a separate methodology to measure carbon emissions by our first mile and last mile delivery partners. It's also based on weight, but instead of precisely measuring the travel distance, we are taking the surface of the destination country, so the final mile delivery country. We are calculating that surface into a circle, and we are assuming that each parcel would be traveling the radius of this circle. The reason why we developed and got approved this methodology by EcoAct is because we are of course working with multiple last mile delivery partners, and it would have been a huge effort and almost impossible at this stage to collect all the precise data. So we decided to go for this method, which will normally overestimate the carbon footprint of the last mile, because normally airports are located where most of the people live, or at least close to these areas, and not in the middle of nowhere, and from the airports the last mile delivery will happen. And as I said, this methodology was verified by EcoAct as well, and they confirmed that it will really overestimate the carbon footprint, which is not a problem because we are in voluntary offsetting schemes. We are not in compliance schemes that are driven by laws at this stage. So, as you will understand, this is a dynamic situation. We're all in unknown territory here regarding sustainable delivery and carbon reporting, and everyone is moving at a different pace. My big learning is that transparency has never been so important as we grapple with new ways of working. If we are transparent with consumers about what we can achieve, about methodology and calculations, I think this will also help to foster trust. We must accept that ongoing work and constant innovation will be required to address our environmental impact. So where next for Asendia? Having achieved carbon neutrality through offsetting, what are our next projects? We understand, of course, that offsetting is not a solution to the global climate change in the long term. Businesses need to have detailed knowledge about their carbon footprint and find long-term solutions to reduce this. So we have a pipeline of new innovations that will be launching from 2023 for our retail customers. These include a customer-level carbon calculator, so to give our customers transparency about their individual carbon footprint with Asendia, green label delivery products, and alternative last-mile delivery methods, including low-emission deliveries for cities. Because we understand, as sustainable aviation fuel is still in experimental phase, we understand the last mile is our leverage. Even if it will not make a big difference, it will make a difference. Legislation is needed and will come into effect in phased fashion in the next few years. We must be ready with practical ways to measure and report the carbon emissions of every parcel delivery and find ways to reduce the carbon footprint of cross-border e-commerce. Retailers must therefore master carbon calculation, or at least partner with logistics experts who can do this on their behalf. It is important to explain that green delivery is unlikely to be free delivery. By offering the option of low-carbon last-mile delivery, we can balance convenience with responsibility. Creative ideas will be, of course, required from retailers' marketing departments, from your marketing departments maybe, weaving environmental values into the brand messaging and loyalty schemes. No one's nailed the full delivery impact yet, but with innovations, smart thinking, and clear communication, we can make a difference. So, thank you everyone for listening, and I'm now happy to have more questions.
Very, very interesting. Lots of insights. I guess we'll have a lot of questions too. So. We've got our experts question person here. Do you have any question in the audience? I've got a couple of questions for you. Maybe add more on that. Anyone who wants to maybe get more insight? You good? Yeah, feel free to interrupt or ask question if you have. My very first question would be maybe a very expertise question, or maybe a personal question. What is your deep feeling on, you talk about offsetting, and can you hear me well? Yeah.
I hear you.
Yeah, you talk about offsetting and compensation. What's your deep feeling on this process? Because we hear quite a lot of time that offsetting is not a solution, because it's actually drive us away from doing things and changing. So yeah, how would you react to this?
Thank you for the question. On one hand, I do have a feeling about it, and on the other hand, I do have some knowledge about it.
Yep.
And the good thing is that it fits well together. The planet doesn't care about where our carbon emissions are offset, first point, whether this is in China or whether this is in European forests or whatever. So, from a knowledge point of view, I really understood it doesn't matter as long as we make sure that we invest in certified projects that are strictly monitored, controlled, and this is the case with the Clean Development Mechanism. This is the label our Gaolin Wind Project has got. From a feeling point of view, of course, I like forests as well. I really enjoy spending a lot of time in forests. So, of course, it would be nice to maybe plant a forest in the area where I live. But I'm convinced that carbon offsetting, wherever it happens, is a first intermediary step to manage the climate catastrophe. So, feelings and thoughts are matching well.
Okay, thank you. Another question for you, in case there's no in the audience. You've had very interesting metrics on surveys, and there's always a disconnection between what people wish, what are the intention, and what people are doing. And you see that 50%, depending on the survey, but 50% of the consumers say that they would like to have a green delivery option. But when it comes to actually paying a bit more or doing the action of having, a very concrete sustainable delivery, it's another question. And then the percentage is actually, going down. My question is, to you, what are the main blockers? And you've talked to many of your customers. Do you think that the blockers are mainly coming from the regulation? They don't have any benefits to do so? Is it coming from the customers? Is it a cost perspective issue? Like, what would be the main blockers for you?
Oh, very good question as well. Thank you, Damien. So our customers are, of course, telling us their shoppers are driving the need for low carbon deliveries. And I'm a shopper myself sometimes, and I think there are several elements driving shoppers' decisions if they are offered carbon or low carbon deliveries at a higher cost. I think this is the test Zalando did with the 25 cents. So first of all, I think it's important to give visibility to the shoppers about what exactly is going to happen with their 25 cents. Because you mentioned emotions before. We are all human beings. So if you don't see the real use in it, maybe you would then decide to save that money. And on the other hand, yes, I think regulations will be needed to guide our behavior, because the climate catastrophe is maybe very different from the corona pandemic we just overcame, because it's not that direct, the impact is not that visible, and then for us it's very difficult to take, tough decisions and at a higher cost. So I wouldn't blame anybody for that at the end.
Okay. I have a list of questions. I'm all set for another hour, but I want you to participate. How many retailers do we have in the room? Well, in the room. Okay. Who are actually, okay, two of you. Three. Are you actually using carbon neutral solution for delivery, at least for last mile, or are you interested in? Like, is it something you already do, or is it something you consider? Already do? Already do. Okay. Is it coming from, just a question maybe for everyone, and maybe you can also answer this one. Is it coming mainly from your customers' request, or is it because at a governance, and then we're going to talk about people maybe. Is it because at a governance, let's say, level, you had this request or you had this need? Maybe, yeah, you give the mic to, thank you. Thank you very much for being forced to participate. No, we appreciate. Yeah, over there.
So I would like to say it's more customer driven at the end, and to provide the customer experience at the end.
And do you believe that you are ready to face the customer wish with actually the service provider that you have, not the one that you have right now, but let's say the offer that you have in the market, or is it a struggle for you to find the right partner?
Depends on the market, let's say. Huh? It's for some markets, I'm pretty sure we have the right partners. For other markets, I think there's some, let's say, room of improvement.
Yeah.
It depends at the end.
Okay, thank you. We talk about people too, right? Because sustainability globally includes, take into consideration people. This is very important, and I know you're also in charge of people at Asendia. How do you concretely engage or involve people in this sustainable development, or the long path that we have to do as a society?
This is actually very easy, because what we discovered at Asendia is that people really embrace our actions related to sustainability. Our employees are looking for purpose. They like their job, their professional expertise, but they are also looking for purpose. And telling them, okay, now we are 100% carbon neutral, we are investing in this wind farm project. They are really very interested. They wanted to learn more. They are asking for training. So I think it's also very human again, because sustainability is all about the future of human beings, to create a future in the long run. And I think it's very natural that also employees, human beings, of course, are interested in that. And for us, it's therefore very easy to also motivate our employees to be ambassadors of Asendia's journey.
Okay. Another question. The standards. and the fact that we don't have any so I've got many clients telling me that it's a break. I mean, it's a blocker for them because they don't know where to start from. And I think the methodology is very interesting because it's always good to share within the industry different methodology, and then people can decide if that actually fits, what they're doing or not. But to me, one of the blockers is the standard. As long as we are actually doing a bit of everything without a global standard agreed, in the industry, that might be an excuse not doing anything, right? And not measuring things, saying, yeah, but, we don't have any framework, so we don't know how to do so we don't do it. Unless it comes from a very high customer request. What are your answers to this? Or maybe a bit broader, where do you think the standard should come from? Like, how should we try to move into global standard? Like, what's your professional idea on that?
Okay. This is a very, very broad and complex question because, of course, there are two markets for carbon offsetting in a way. There are compliance markets. So already in the European Union and also in the US, some companies are legally obliged to buy carbon credits to offset their emissions. And then there is the voluntary market. And at the moment, even states are looking for global standards. There are no standards of the United Nations or whatever on how to calculate carbon. But this is not an excuse just for doing nothing, because even if the methodology slightly differ, I think what I showed you before, it's quite common sense that a parcel traveling a longer distance by air instead of train, for instance, with a higher weight would cause more carbon emission than a very light parcel traveling by train a very short distance. So, and this is what this methodology is about. Yeah. And even if there might be slight differences in emission factors, as I mentioned, and other slight scientific details, I would say the common framework is there. And I think everybody is able to understand that this is seems to be quite reasonable. But I guess the standards will need to, of course, there are groups of companies that are trying to establish standards like the science-based target framework. But I guess the standards at the end will need to come from states, and they will need to set down in regulations. Yeah. And then we will have, again, a level playing field also for companies.
Yeah, so we don't have any excuses anymore.
No.
Last question. Very last comment, maybe. What would be your argument, not argument, but maybe how would you convince people to jump into this sustainability? If you have to reduce, I know it's a hard question, in 2 words, like how would you actually encourage retailers to move into that transition if they are not there yet? What would be your main argument to try to convince them going that way, sustainability, at least for the shipment to start with?
I guess because it makes sense, and because everybody would agree that ordering a handy cable from China that will be shipped to Europe is not sustainable. But instead of trying to attack a global market, this is impossible, we should try to go small steps. And it's a good feeling if you are doing something that makes sense.
That's true. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thanks for listening. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.